Hi, everybody. This is Victoria Vesna, and you're listening to Vibrations Matter. In this episode, I'm delighted to share with you my conversation with Jill Purce, whose work I've been following for quite a while now, and whose work I found out about through her partner, husband, scientist Rupert Sheldrake, whose work on morphic fields has always and remains as something very fascinating. I was immediately drawn to the depth and integrity to her approach, and also to find out about her amazing background and her journey through discovery of various fields, how they intersect. For instance, she was early on in her life journey, partner and collaborator with Karl Heinz Stockhausen, who those of you studying electronic music or sound art would certainly know about. She studied in parallel with Tibetan Lama Namkhai Norbu Rinpoche, and later she started partnering and making her life with Rupert Sheldrake. She started bringing sound, resonance, and patterns of connection across disciplines. These influences of experimental electronic music, Tibetan Buddhism, somatic awareness, and most important, ritual coalesced into a very unique methodology that treats voice not as a linear melodic tool, but as a multidimensional resonant field. Over the years, she's developed workshops where she weaves overtone singing, movement, and family constellations, drawing on the ideas about the morphic fields and embodied listening. I even took one of her overtone classes myself, wanting to experience her teaching firsthand and also how she transmits knowledge through vibration rather than explanation. And what struck me immediately was how deeply her vocal practice and her approach to resonant interface was related to the students by practice, to thinking about voice as a larger field of memory, pattern, and relation. So she offers a rare bridge between scientific inquiry, contemplative practice, and embodied vocal experience. Only recently, I have made the connection that she is also the author of one of the most influential books on spirals, a book that I picked up ages ago as a student at the Academy of Fine Art in Belgrade. And I remember how influential this was to me. So this started all coming together to me in a very interesting way, where I can see how her approach to voice is about creating a site of reorganization where attention, intention, and resonance align. So she doesn't only engage sonic aesthetics, but healing, ritual, and ancestral memory, positioning the voice as a portal to both human lineage and more than human continuity. Her life reminds us that the way we move through our journey is really like a spiral, continuing, returning, expanding, deepening as we move through sound pattern transformation. I know you'll enjoy this as much as I did. I'm very much excited about this meeting, first of all, in person. Although I have to say, you probably don't know that I took one of your classes.
Oh, did you? Where was that?
I took an online class on voice
Oh, okay.
and
Yeah.
overtone in particular.
Yeah.
And this was really to just get a sense also how you approach it and how you work with those who are very new to some of these ideas that are, in fact, quite complex that you deal with. I can absolutely recognize many, 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 many layers
Oh,
and
yes.
experiences and embodied experiences. And I'm just so thrilled to talk to you. And you don't know that I'm a fan.
Oh. Well, it's interesting because the two, um, you when you said embodied, it's interesting because I'm at the same time trying to transmit a technique and at the same time embody the experience, induct presence people, and they're very different things really. So it's a challenge, but I love it.
Well, just I love your multidimensional approach and multicultural, and also to have these different threads combined in something that's very unique to you.
Yes.
So my question really would start with, how did this start? How did you, very early on, if you rewind your film to early days where maybe as a child even it was purely intuitive and not really in any way theorized or intellectualized?
Well, I think as a child, I definitely had a very powerful experience as a child, which is I had a very eccentric family, and my father particularly was great. They were both crazy. My mother was a concert pianist. My father was a surgeon, and but my father really preferred to kind of work with. Well, I always saw it pipes, really, water pipes. But being a surgeon, you're dealing with pipes anyway, so it's the same kind of thing. But one time we were in the west of Ireland. We often went to Ireland. My father was from the north of Ireland, and we were going to on a boat trip to an island about an hour away called Inishturk, and being eccentric, my father went late at night when
Oh, goodness.
most people were going home.
Wow,
So
scary.
the only people in the boat were my brother and I and my parents, and three old women dressed in black standing at the back of the boat. And a storm, a violent wind blew, and a storm raged suddenly, and we were terrified we were going to drown. It was absolutely chilling, terrifying. I remember this. I must have been about 7, and
Mhm.
then these three women at the back started a kind of strange wailing chant, and our fear became a kind of ecstasy, and the wind subsided, the storm abated, and we arrived. And so this was my
Amazing.
first magical experience of the power of sound and the effect of the voice, really,
Mhm.
transmission of the effect of the voice. But sound was bred on the bone because my mother was a concert pianist, so I was brought up in a house with 3 concert grand pianos, and my godfather had a whole piano house. And I every day, my mother, when I was tiny, used to go and visit him and talk to him about music, and I went along and used to wander about this factory with disembodied keyboards and actions, and with very exotic people tuning pianos out of tune, actually. And I
That's
think
right. That's right. Yes.
I think that induction of the tuning it out of tune, which is what you have to do with pianos now, since the 17th century. The well-tempered scale.
That's
So
right.
I think this probably, I don't know, maybe it sort of inducted into me a need to retune us in a way, using of course the voice. So there were lots of things as a child. And then I became very fascinated much later with form and pattern and how form comes into being, and at a pretty early age really. And then when I was at university, I did my thesis on the spiral in art and nature, and I remember going to the professor of botany, and because of so many plants have this spiral form of phyllotaxis, and marveling about this, and he said, "Oh well, we don't ask those kind of questions." And much later, in the early 70s, I did a research fellowship with Maurice Wilkins in his department, and he had just got the Nobel Prize for with Watson and Crick for discovering the
The
structure of
DNA.
DNA.
Mhm.
And his laboratory was littered with horns and shells, and the center of sunflowers, and with Fibonacci series, and in fact it was a picture of an Italian cauliflower that really made the connection between my work and his, and got me my research fellowship in his department.
Oh my goodness. So we could say that you're the first artist in residence in the science lab.
Oh yes,
That's
yeah.
incredible because now it's become a thing, of course. When I started working with scientists some 20 years ago in labs, everybody thought it was something very new, but you were really pioneering this
Oh yes. I mean,
sheer.
I
Mhm.
used to go in every day and we'd talk. I'd written the book. I wrote my book, The Mystic Spiral, in '74.
I got that book
Ah,
years and years and years ago. I think I was a teenager in New York City, and that book has gone through many looking. It really, really inspired me. I did not make that connection to you, I have to
oh.
admit. It took me a while when I started reading about your background a little bit, and I thought, oh, that's that book that I saw when I was. So you can see how this lineage kind of an inspiration flows in and out of different people. It's amazing. Very
I know
powerful work.
it's interesting because a lot of people don't associate that book with me, and also my husband and sons, Rupert Sheldrake, Merlin Sheldrake, and Cosmo Sheldrake, all of whom are kind of superstars.
Yes.
And they don't associate me with that either because I have a different name. So what I was going to say was I wrote the book in '74 and came out in '74 rather. And I used to go into the lab, I remember, with Maurice Wilkinson. He underlined every passage in the book and we discuss it. And, once people have got their Nobel Prize, they're much freer to ask really interesting questions. Whereas before that, they have to get grants and they have to toe the line and be seen to be kind of rather boring and
That's right.
normal.
That's right. Especially in the scientific community, it's really, really strict and rigorous and rigid. And as you're climbing the ladder, it's really tough to stray and ask crazy questions. This
Absolutely. And then once you've got your Nobel Prize, you can ask
you
anything
can
you
do
want.
anything you want. Exactly. Exactly. So from the spiral book, did you start connecting to the sound and the
Yes.
spiral?
Yeah, so the spiral was really what got me interested in the spiral was how form comes into being in nature,
Right.
and so the idea of water flows having a resistance and turning back into eddies, and the temporary form of eddies in movement and so forth, and the spiral is a manifestation of form and movement and development, and then what I began to realize that in all traditional cultures the coming into being of form was seen as a kind of sonorous resonant activity, and so angels are seen as this as inhabiting this realm. They fly, so they inhabit a realm above us, sort of nearer the heavens, or the spiritual realm, or what we think of up and down. And they come in choirs, not herds or packs or flocks.
Right.
They come in choirs. So this is a traditional way of describing the kind of transition between spirit and matter. And
Hmm.
in all cultures, the beginning of the world was seen as a sonorous event or a sonorous process. So in the beginning was the
Right.
word. In the beginning was the word. At the beginning was the seven vibrations of Okatameli, the Om. So many different traditions have this notion of the vibratory translation of spirit into matter. And I think now, because science always is a little behind and catches up with these almost mythological ways of describing these relationships which have always existed. And so now science sees everything in terms of resonance. And particularly interesting, and this is something that I was interested in the 1960s, was the manifestation, the patterns shown in seamless, formless substances and powders and liquids through the vibration of sound. So Leonardo was one of the first people to do experiments with dust, and then you have all kinds of people, Hooke and well, of course, later Pliadny
Right.
there's a whole stream of Faraday, of course, of people who were and now interestingly, in the 1980s, I had somebody in my workshop who was a sound engineer who heard me talking about these visualizations, manifestations of form coming into being through sound. And he went away and built a device that he called a cymoscope to show this. And interestingly, my husband and son have now bought one of these devices and are trying to systematize the process and talk about the different relationships of different sounds and so on. Of course, it all depends on the limiting factor of the vessel when the vibrations are being returned to the center. But so I think science has now come to try and describe the same process, but not using all these mythological descriptions as being the singing and angels and the great chain of being, or in the beginning was the word or the logos or whatever, but actually in terms of sound, actually in terms of resonance. And these you can actually see this when you vibrate these different substances, and then you see form coming into being. It's
Right.
absolutely extraordinary.
It is extraordinary. And that makes me, well, you mentioned your husband, Rupert Sheldrake, who actually was my path to you. So when I was doing my PhD in the UK, actually, with Roy Ascott, I, of course, came across Sheldrakes and the ideas of the field, and somehow through that got to you, which is great. But your meeting is what's actually quite interesting, and I can't quite remember. You should remind us. Did you meet in India, or was he resident in India? That that meeting to me is very powerful and important in both of your paths coming together, really art and science coming together.
Yes, we did meet in India actually. I mean, we could have met long before, but we didn't. And so he was working in India at the time. We met in 1982, and he was working in Hyderabad at ICRISAT, the Institute of Crop Research, semi-arid crops. And he had come, there was a conference in Bombay or Mumbai called Ancient Wisdom and Modern Science.
Oh,
And
wow.
I, in 82, February 82, and I was talking about, um, um, well, essentially spiral forms, but through the coming together of opposites, really. And he was so within the ancient wisdom kind of side, and he was talking about modern science, and we met there, and then for a few days, because he was only there for a few days because it was an important time for him in his research. And then strangely, I was on my way to the Himalayas to do extensive retreats, and on my way, and he was on his way home to England, and we ran into each other in Delhi, of all places, at the at the handloom emporium. I mean,
That's insane. I mean, Delhi is so crazy and huge and billions of people. I mean, it's so cosmic, right? That meeting had to happen.
yeah,
So,
it happened, and I was on my way north to the Himalayas. He was on his way back to England, and we ran into each other. I mean, it was, yeah, go figure. It was extraordinary.
so what was the retreats you were going to?
I
Where
was
were you
doing
off to?
well. I'd been studying with Tibetan Buddhists for a long time, and I was going up into the Himalayas to do solo retreats, which I did for long periods.
I want to know more. I'm actually talking to you from a Tibetan center, Pure Land Farms in Topanga. And a lot of the source that I keep going back to is Tibetan teachings. And I know you've studied also with Norbu Rinpoche. So do tell us more about it. I know that everything I've found was just kind of slipping through that, but I would like to dive deeper into that source. It's right in the back of you,
Right.
Padmasambhava.
Yes, indeed, indeed. Yeah, so I over the years before I had met all kinds of teachers, and I you know practiced in Sufi and various other traditions. And then I was a general editor of a series of books with Thames and Hudson, the publisher, who actually published The Mystic Spiral. And I was wanting to find somebody to do a book on Tibetan Buddhism. And I had also met and worked with various Tibetans who visited London many times, and so I'd been studying Tibetan Buddhism already before. But then I found him in Italy, where he'd been brought over by Giuseppe Tucci, and he was living and working in Italy, and I came across him in the mountains, um, and I started to study with him, and I suppose I studied with him until he died, from 1978 until he died a few years ago. And he taught Dzogchen. So in Tibetan Buddhism, there are three modalities. One is where you go and sort of into a monastery and hide away, and one is where you so that's renunciation, if you like, and then there's transformation, where most spiritual practices are in this realm of transformation, where you take one thing and you turn it into something else. You purify, so the implication is that you're impure before and you become pure through the practice, and then so all practices are transformation, really, and so they're in duality. And then
Right.
there's spontaneous liberation, which you find with Dzogchen, as it's called, which is somehow you've already been enlightened all along, but you hadn't quite realized it. And so almost there's nothing to do, nowhere to go, no practice to do. So it's quite tricky, really, because there
Yes,
aren't really any practices, whereas most practices are in this realm of transformation.
that's right.
Yeah. So he taught both, really. I mean, all the
Mm.
practices he taught were really transformative practices. And there were many. I mean, and what I liked about him was that he'd lived in the West and worked in the West, and he taught at the university. And so he understood the Western mind. And so, the practices that he taught, although Tibetan Buddhism is very sort of bizarre and strange and baroque and peculiar and full of strange images, he made it very understandable to the Western mind, and that was what appealed to me. And he understood the Western mind, and I think that's important. Yeah.
So, as your teacher, in parallel to all these other experiences, what was he giving you with the practices to filter and distill the sounds when you're working with vocals and all the different practices that you've employed? How did you bring that into, because I totally realize, being very familiar also with Tibetan Buddhism, that, and I do this myself, you kind of filter it out and make it accessible and don't go deep into all the incredible structures that are just overwhelming if you start there, as you know. Uh, I find that the way you distill it is just so pure that it allows anyone to enter. And that really is Dzogchen in essence. Uh,
Yes, and I think that we we did a lot of chanting together as a group,
right.
and that, I mean, you could say that's not really Dzogchen because there is no practice with Dzogchen, but um, as I say, a lot of the practices he did were transformation, were the practices of transformation, and I think chanting together, I really got a sense of the power of chanting, and
Right.
the identity of sound and light and rays and so forth, um, and the nature of reality, and so and also. I because of these practices, there was something to do. Something actually. As I said, the notion of spontaneous liberation, that it doesn't give you anything to do, and it's frustrating. Whereas practices actually help you to become realized in some way, and so he gave a lot of practices. Yeah.
Dance too. What I understand is that Judgment is dangerous in the sense that you could get very arrogant thinking, oh, I'm liberated, I don't have to do anything.
And that's the trouble. That's why I kind of slightly lost touch with the group, because there was a kind of level of arrogance. You know, we're better, we're special, we're
Yes, yes.
enlightened, and that wasn't the case with other groups I found. So that was, you know, that it was that I found a little disaffecting. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a real danger. So it's actually the practices that were being introduced was to bring back the humility that you're always starting from the beginning. And I see it really, correct me if I'm wrong, that the study with the spiral brought you to the mandala, and the practices of dance and sound and voice and really just making that kind of diamond path.
Yes, I mean, I for many years until COVID, actually, I did, I had a very profound understanding of the mandala, which wasn't something that he ever taught, actually. But
Hmm.
I found it to be the most extraordinary. It's so many layers of understanding. And so what I did in my week longs, which actually were more like 10-day longs, was I had the group become the mandala. And then with a very, very complex process of interactions, depending on who was at the center of the mandala, what, you know, what we were working with. So there was a half-hour chanting practice, and we had four circles, and then in the middle, and so we had the four circles of the mandala, and then the people worked their way every half hour. They moved along, and they spent about a day in each of these circles until they finally
Hmm.
were in the center. And then they wore the colors of the different directions, and in the center I would work with them, and then finally give them a silk scarf at kata, and then so the group would gradually turn white, and they would go back to the beginning again. And so by the end of the week, the whole mandala was white, having started
Mm.
with working with the
Wow,
afflictive emotions.
beautiful. Do you
Yeah,
have some good documentation of that?
not really, actually,
Oh,
because
too bad.
I never allowed people to film it.
Right.
So the point was that everybody's working with the afflictive emotions of manifested in each of the directions and transforming
Mm.
them into their wisdoms by working with different people, permutating always with different people. I once had somebody document their journey, you know, exactly who they were working with on what, in what direction, and what
Mm.
direction within each direction, because that's everybody worked in four directions within the, so you worked around the same, and then you worked in the center, and then when you were working in the center you worked in the four directions. And I mean, it was incredibly complex, so it was a kind of Western understanding of the mandala in personified. So it wasn't
Hmm.
just an image that you looked at and you realized it was kind of moving, and you realized that it was about the nature of the psyche, of reality, of the consciousness, and so on. But you actually experienced it by moving.
You're in it. You're inside of it.
Yeah,
You are the mandala, right? In the end.
exactly.
So
So
that
this was
reminds
amazing. Yeah,
that sounds so amazing. I'm so sad you didn't document it. You should at least draw it out or write. Like it's because it sounds really complex and well developed and amazing. And it
yeah.
makes me think of the labyrinth.
It's very
So,
similar. I mean, before I started working with the mandala, I did many. I mean, in the Mystic Spiral, I have a whole section on the labyrinth,
that's
and
right.
I inspired the placing of the labyrinth you know, in Grace Cathedral, and
Oh,
I,
really? Wow.
yeah, Lauren
Amazing.
Andress, who did that, you know, read my book and was inspired by that. So,
Really? That's
yeah,
incredible. You're just passing through like that's a little side detail. That's
yeah,
huge.
I know.
That's
So,
amazing.
so I did many ceremonies with the labyrinth, and you know, working with it is absolutely fascinating. And it's essentially it's a spiral journey to the center and then back again. And just when you think you're about to reach the center, you're thrown to the outside again,
That's
and
right.
then you get back. So it's an amazing pathway. And
Yes.
you know, it's in some ways similar to the mandala, although with the mandala I was able to permutate it and make it very complex and very powerful. But the mandala, I mean, the labyrinth was extraordinary. I did many ceremonies with labyrinths.
Interesting. And all this is also not documented.
Also not documented.
Oh my God, what?
I know, it's tragic, actually.
Well, no, it's not. You can always go back and revisit. Artists in my realm, artists do that all the time. You can see, for instance, a good example is Marina Abramovic. She went back to some of her very early conceptual art pieces and is not redoing them herself. In fact, she's having students redo them. So
Well,
it's,
she invited me, actually. I know her. She invited me in '83. I was teaching in Holland, and she and Uwe, who she was married
oh,
to at the
wow, wow.
time,
That
this
was
is
an intense
1983.
time. Yeah.
Yeah. So she invited me to. She was the curator of an exhibition in Holland in a
Right.
medieval village, and she asked me if I would be part of it. So
Amazing.
I did, and actually we were there were Lawrence Wiener and various other artists. There were about six of us, I suppose, with them, and we were all given filmmakers. And I made a film called Just One More Breath, which is on my website. Um,
Okay.
so yeah, so yes, I worked with her. Yeah, she invited me to be
There you go.
part of that.
So let's get back into how does the voice and frequency and vibration fit into all of these, the mandalas, the labyrinths, the breath. In other words, it does, obviously, but how are you filtering that and distilling it into the
Well,
what creates the form, as you said?
I think sound is the key. I mean, on the one hand, it's quality and quantity. It's the only way that we have of unifying quality and quantity. And I see the human dilemma as knowing and just occasionally experiencing a unified existence, whether one understands it as something divine or spiritual or the presence or being present, or there are so many different words for that experience. And yet we have to live in a world of duality. And we
Mm.
do live in a world of duality, upwards and onwards, especially in the West. The whole salvation history, upwards and onwards of development, evolution, going anywhere but where you are. Music goes somewhere else. Everything goes somewhere else. And so, an AI, of course, is absolutely based on duality. Everything technical, all computers are based on off, yes, no, duality. And AI, which is coming to the fore so much at the moment, is based on duality. So we live in a world of duality, and we have to communicate that way. And I see you as other, and therefore you're separate from me. But I either like you or I don't like you, and then that's based on the delusion of ignorance, which is not seeing you as part of me, as the oneness.
That's right.
So the Tibetans see this fundamental issue as absolutely central and the cause of all problems, and I see it very much as a problem of how do we work with this dilemma of knowing there is something some unity, unifying experience, some presence, and yet living in this world of duality. And sound, because sound is unique in itself, on the one hand, if I go like this, I interrupt the continuity of your experience. If I speed it up, we get rhythm. If I speed it up beyond 16 cycles per second, we have a note, faster, quicker, higher. We have the harmonic. So, and then, we have duration. So now and 20 minutes later, or with Stockhausen or Wagner, who knows how long, a few hours later or days later. So the duration is also counting. So everything is based on counting. All of music, all of sound is based on counting. And yet the experience that we have through the music is ineffable, is without
That's right.
possibility of counting. And so it's pure quality, qualia, purity. So sound is unique in that it's based on counting. It is counting, and yet the experience that it inducts us into is pure quality. So because of that, I think sound is unique in the sense that it overcomes or plays with or is that intersection between these two experiences which are absolutely fundamental to the human condition.
And what about that which we do not hear? That which is beyond our hearing, which is very, very narrow, as you know. I mean,
Yeah,
the
and I mean, a lot of practices involve
that's right.
silent mantra. And what is that? So, what is silent sound? So, there is so much we don't understand. We don't understand
Yes.
how you can move sound around, inaudible sound around with attention. What does all that mean? We really know so little, and the idea that scientists say we're going to understand everything,
Yes.
it's the kind of arrogance.
Oh,
How can we understand consciousness? It seems to me beyond
I
belief.
know. I was forbidden to use the word embodied intelligence with a neuroscientist I worked with. He said, don't say it in public. And
Yeah,
I was like, but what about the octopus? It's got a,
yeah.
intelligence throughout its body. So we had some interesting conversations. But that reminds me, I'm very, very curious about the relationship with Stockhausen. Really tell it a little bit deeper because it's always another thing that just gets slid over, but I think it's very significant. And I'm guessing that it was happening in parallel to the Tibetan teachings that you were
Yeah,
receiving.
it was in parallel to most things. So when was it? I think it was 1971 we
Oh,
met.
wow. Early on.
Oh yeah, really early on, and we met at, well, actually, funnily enough, it was the there was a musician who I'd been at university with who was part of a group called Roxy Music called Andy Mackay, and
Oh, Roxy
Stockhausen was,
music.
yeah, yeah,
Wow.
and Stockhausen was coming to London to do 7 concerts, and Andy kept visiting me and saying, "Are you going? Are you going? Are you going?" And so in the end, I decided to go, and I went on a motorbike with my brother, and I never went anywhere with my brother, and um, and then in the break, oh, he was playing Spirala, of course, that was Spiral.
Of course. Of course.
And then in the break, Andy came up to me and said, "Well, have you met him yet?" And so I said, "No, of course not." So I went up into the break and I stood at the back of the circle. There was a circle of people all around him. And my brother came up to me, dragged me by the arm, and pulled me into the center and said, "Mr. Stockhausen, I want you to meet my sister." So that was the beginning. And then I went to Germany. I lived with him for 4 years on and off. I kept coming back to England for short periods. And I was working at the same time on all kinds of themes, spirals and forms and so on. And yeah, he was a big influence on me because he was extraordinary. He had this ability to see, and he had a very powerful psychic ability, which he could focus where he wanted. And in general, he focused it on his music, but he could focus it anywhere. Yeah.
But
So
wait, you
yeah, very
skipped
interesting.
very quickly to, and I lived with him for years. Like, what? How did that develop?
Well, I flew to Germany and I lived we became partners. And for 4 years I lived in his house in Germany, in Kürten, which is near Bergisch Gladbach, which is outside Cologne, where we lived in the house that he'd built. And I was there for 4 years, working with him, and we also did various pieces. So I was very interested in the effect of sound on matter at that time, and so
Okay.
I inspired him and worked with him on a piece called Alphabet for Liège, which was commissioned by the city of Liège, which was it was a piece in a half built television studio showing, and there were different installations in each of these 13 spaces, each one showing a different effect of sound on matter. And so there was one where somebody called Hugh Davis, who'd been his assistant, who was showing how you could break glass with sound. So he'd get enormous sheets of glass, which we'd bolt onto a siren, which was a mechanical device for changing pitch, with a knob, and
Wow.
with sheets of glass. And then he'd pour water on the glass, and and as he turned up the pitch, you could see the patterns forming. These wonderful Faraday patterns when you reach the harmonic of the fundamental of the glass. And then finally he'd reach the fundamental of the glass, he'd worry it and go up and down very slightly above the pitch of the glass, and then finally, and all the public would come and waiting, 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 and then whoosh, the glass would
Oh,
shatter. So, and then there was singing, there was dissolving sound with sound, there was chanting into bread making sound. I was involved with that. There were
wait,
13
wait.
different installations of showing the effect of sound on matter. And then there were some songs where he had invoked me, Indiana leader they were called. And so yeah, we did a lot of things together.
Are you credited on these shows that
Well, I
you've worked
don't,
with him on? Because that's something
yeah.
that, I mean, I certainly researched and I didn't come across your name.
Well, if you look up for Alpha Bet for Liège,
Well,
yes,
maybe that piece, yeah,
yeah,
I
I think
noted
that
it for sure.
that piece is definitely probably credited. I'm not sure about anything else, but that was the main one that we worked on together.
Yeah, it's a little bit like working with scientists and they make papers and you just don't exist. Yeah, it's like,
So
okay,
often the
didn't
case.
I inspire this to,
So
it
so
wasn't in
often the
a
case.
dialogue.
So often the case. So often the case.
So did this kind of, I want, maybe breakup is a strong word, but the splitting up of that relationship, was that just kind of natural? You outgrow each other and you move on, and the
Yeah.
relationship continued, the friendship continued,
Yes, the
or
friendship continued, but I mean, I never enjoyed living in the middle of nowhere in the middle of Germany. And my German was never very good, and most of the people he knew were musicians,
I
and
see.
he was always sort of the boss, and so I sort of missed my community really. And so yeah, it just sort of ran its course, and then I came back to England, and then I wrote the Mystic Spiral, and then got involved with the Namkhai Norbu Rinpoche, the
Right.
Tibetan, and yeah, I went back, several times there, but it was just time.
I
These
just think that to have that before you met with Namkhai Norbu is just so significant, because you did all those experiments, but in a very kind of exploratory Western sound, scientific curiosity way, without all the other lineage and knowledge of how you utilize this sound and how you work with it.
And then, yeah, in '74, the BBC film made a film about me called
Yes, I
More Ways
watched
Than
it.
One.
Hmm.
Yeah, and so that was just immediately after I came back, and as well, that was about the book, The Spiral Form,
Yes, yeah.
and that's on my website as well, More Ways Than One. And we went back to Germany to interview him for that as well,
Uh-huh.
to Donno Esching, and he talks about me there. Yeah, so it was a very interesting period.
How did you gravitate towards the Namkhai Norbu Rinpoche? How did you find him? Or I'm
Oh, it's probably
curious.
true. Yeah, I was editing a series of book and looking for somebody to write a book on Tibetan Buddhism. And I was on my
Uh-huh.
way to work with a woman called Lucy Lamy, who had worked who was the stepdaughter of Schwaller de Lubitz, and she was writing a book for me on Egyptian mysteries. And I was looking for a Tibetan, and then I was packing, strangely, and all of a sudden I got this message: go to the market. It was a sort of spiritual message, psychic message. So I went to the market, the local market, and I waited for further instruction. And then a voice came and said, Jill, I want you to come for tea. So I went for tea and with this woman who lived around the corner, and she wanted me to meet this person who was an English person who was an illustrator of Tibetan art, an extraordinary person, in fact, because I think she wanted me to use his illustrations in my books. Then
Mhm.
he said, "Oh, I think there's this Tibetan Lama in Italy," and that was it.
Ah, Go see him.
Yeah.
Check that
So
out.
then after going to see the woman in France about the Tibetan, the Egyptian mysteries, Lucy Lamy, I then went and found Norbu afterwards. I drove up into the mountains and found him. So that's how it happened.
And you immediately had a kind of a resonance where you could.
Yes. I expected him to be dressed in fancy clothes, but he wasn't. He was dressed in old jeans and an old jacket. But so I would. That was surprising for me. And I stayed. I mean, I intended to go for 3 days to talk to him about doing a book, but I found what he was saying was so extraordinary. I just stayed for a month.
Oh, really? How wonderful. It's almost like a curriculum was written for you because
Really?
you were schooling yourself, and there's no such school even to this day, really. If you look at academia, and I certainly have been wrangled with trying to figure out how do I connect all these disciplines and all these people, and that's what you were doing on your
Yes,
path intuitively and from hearing these voices, right?
absolutely. I mean, yeah, just following where I was led.
Yes.
Yeah,
So,
I've never had an agenda really. I've always just done what where I was led. Yeah.
yeah. And how did overtone singing come into the picture?
Well, let's see. So I first encountered it with Tibetans because Tibetans
Of
um,
course.
do it, and many years before, the whole monastery of the Gutta monks came to London, and for some
Mm,
reason, I was given the job of taking care of the whole monastery, and so I drove them all over London. I had an old van, and I put them all in the back of the van and drove them all over London. So I first encountered it then, and that was I don't know when that was. That would have been very early 70s, I think, or
hmm.
maybe late 60s. I can't remember. And so that's when I first encountered it. So I've encountered the overtone chanting. Oh no, but I counted it long before that because I already knew of it long before I was with Stockhausen. Because Stockhausen in 1968 wrote a piece called Stimmung for very simple form of
Yes.
vocal harmonics, and I
Yes.
already was familiar with it long before that. So I think I first came across it through hearing recordings of Tibetans and Mongolians and Tuvans doing it,
Hmm. Hmm.
and so long before I went to Germany, and then he had already written this piece called Stimmung, and the first thing we did actually when I went there was we traveled over North America with the Collegium Vocale, who was the group that was singing Stimmung. So all over, so we were New York, Boston, Buffalo, Toronto,
Mm,
Ontario, Quebec. So the whole of the east coast of North
right.
America, we were traveling with that piece. So, but I was already very fascinated by it long before that. Yes, it's hard to know. And then, I studied with Tibetans later and um, chant masters of the chant master of the Gita was one of my teachers, and also
Wow.
I studied with
Amazing.
yeah, and I studied with a Tuvan when yeah, so that's and I think that I started interested because when I realized we'd stopped chanting, we'd gone silent. I realized that as a society we'd gone silent, and this was a real problem because everybody said, "Oh, I'm
Sure.
disenchanted," and if you're disenchanted, I would say you need to chant to be made magical through chanting again. And I realized that I had to create a situation where people came together to discover their voices again without. So when I started, you had to, if you wanted to sing with other people or chant with other people, you had to join a choir, which meant you had to read music, you had to sing in tune, and have an audition. And I realized that all those three were irrelevant really because sacred music would be hijacked by the professionals, and the professionals read music, and that was inaccessible to most people. So I realized that I had to introduce people to reclaim their voices, but without any of those activities. And then I realized that singing was no good because if you sing words, firstly, you couldn't be in the present because words go from here to there, and they're discursive. They're everywhere else but here, past, present, and future. So and also, if you sing words if you sing the national anthem on one side of the border, it's the right song. If you cross the border, it's the wrong song. So words were out. So then it had to be a form of chanting with no words. And then I realized that in the 17th century, we'd retuned our music out of tune because of the popularity of keyboard instruments. So we created the well-tempered scale. So I realized that scales were a cultural affair. So
That's right.
you had the Balinese scale, you have the Celtic, also Chinese scale, pentatonic scale. You had all these different forms of dividing the octave, and which were cultural accretions. And I realized that to work really, and also, if you went with the Western scale, you were out of tune. So I realized, firstly, we had to be in tune, secondly, no words, and thirdly, it was important to have a kind of sound which was non-cultural, which was structural, so that's how I started teaching the overtones, because they are non-cultural, really, in the form that I teach them.
And so I took your class, and I think my intuition was right. I thought, I bet you she's taking stuff from all these different cultures and kind of distilling it into something that's so accessible. And in the end, that's really what we need. We need to find the voice, right? And that
But it's important.
voice,
It's important
yes,
also not to have cultural appropriation,
exactly, exactly. And this
and
is
that
a bit of a
is the point.
problem. Sorry to interrupt, but I find it, and I'm wondering how you're navigating or I'm watching you with Tibetan Buddhism, which I've kind of also intuitively since 16, 15, I've kind of kept dipping in or being pulled into it. I find it very hard with my students to bring it in because it immediately is Tibet and China and this and that, and it becomes something that takes them away from the amazing philosophy that's really unique in the
Yeah.
world and the practice, I should say. And of course, the height of it being Dzogchen. So it's really very important what you're doing. I absolutely recognize it and see it. And I'm wondering how you can make it even more impactful. And if the idea of the field somehow comes into it, because I also see how the relationship of your husband's, Rupert Sheldrake's work comes in, and how that's also some kind of dialogue going on there that I'm curious about. But to put it out there in a form that's not dealing with science, it's not dealing with cultures, it's not dealing where we're just planetary citizens tuning into this Schumann vibration, to this wider vibration, and reminding ourselves that we're humans living with all these other creatures on Earth, right? So,
So I think this is really important, and so um, I try to get to the bottom of what's actually happening in these different cultures, and so I'm not interested in sounding like a Tuvan or a Tibetan or I want to understand the structures, and so go beyond anything cultural, and so I don't feel that it's culturally appropriating because I really get to the root of what's going on, and it's very important that, and and um, and as for scientists, until I met Rupert, I worked with all kinds of scientists, and then I married one and realized he could do the science part. And but the field is very, very interesting, and so one of the things that I've been doing for the last 25 years or so is family constellations.
right,
And
right.
this is absolutely based on this notion of the field, whatever that is. The field is just a word that was applied to something with boundaries. I mean, it's very difficult to find words for it. But what I find is so fascinating is that with the family constellations, there is a field of the family and ancestors, and everybody has a kind of field, and groups have fields. I've worked forever with groups of people, and how people come together at a particular time, a particular place, um, to work together is in itself extraordinary and create a field of activity, and the themes come up, and very often you find themes that relate to what's to the group, and they're often common fields. And with the family constellations, when I work with a particular person, so the issue holder, for example, and I try to work with everybody face to face when I do it face to face, the issue holder chooses from naive representatives, people they've often never met, and say, "You're my father, you're my mother, you're my sister, you're my brother," whatever. And then once those people have been identified as who they are, they immediately feel like them, act like them, speak like them, become them. So I realize that, and then they place them, and then it's all about interruptions, unfinished business, things that were not said, trauma that was caught in the moment, societally inappropriate things at the time, incarceration, early death, suicides, maiming, physical, emotional maiming, injustices, any kind of interruption, or racial traumas, of course, causes kind of trauma which goes down through the generations. And so what I do is to identify it, see, and understand it, and resolve it in the way that wasn't done at the time, so stopping it going on down through the generations. And this is extraordinary, that what I realize is that we have this ability to tune into anything at all, as long as we're given the kind of permission to do that. We don't need to be taught to do it. There just has to be the assumption that we can do it, and then and told what channel we're on, as it were, and then we do it. And so we can access the field in some mysterious way, which is something nobody understands. It's just not understandable how we're able to do that, but we can. And the reason, what stops us doing it, is all the kind of insignificant nonsenses that we occupy our life with, all those insignificant things, eating, shitting, vomiting, going to bed, waking up, cooking, eating, meeting, all those kind of day-to-day trivia which get in the way of our being present and actually tuning into anything, into the field or whatever that is. It gets in the way of it, but I think we have that ability to do that. And if anybody is working with that scientifically, of course it is my husband, Rupert. Yeah.
It's pretty amazing to have these two worlds come together for so long that something new emerges. And I'm sure your work influences his work, and it goes both ways, obviously. And then there's the sons that are doing amazing work too.
I know Merlin is. They've both become superstars. They used to be
Yes,
my children, and now I'm their parent.
yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So
So
I,
Merlin's just been traveling all down. He first of all he did a sort of one man show all over the Britain, and
yeah,
then he's been in Australia and New Zealand doing it, and he understands the whole nature of fungi as
yes,
a, as a way of inhabiting the world in a totally different way, which is very prescient and needed, and he always sees the implications of it. And my son makes music where he harnesses and he records the music of animals, the non-human world, birds and fish, and transforms it into magical sounds. And so they're both working with the more than human world, really. And
yes, yes.
yeah.
But the last class that I taught, it was ending actually because of all the stuff going on now in the States, was biotech and art. And I asked the students what would they like to write about so that we create a textbook that's kind of a legacy of what was. We don't know where we're going. And they all wanted to write about fungi.
Oh, the heavens.
Yes, and myceliums. I have
Amazing.
33 essays on fungi
Oh my
and
goodness.
myceliums that I will
Oh
get
my
to
goodness.
eventually.
I know.
But
I mean, I think, Merlin has definitely put it on the map. There's no
oh,
question.
completely. So he was very, very present. Also because they could relate to him as new generation of investigators, I should say. But it is a really important world, and there's also the sound of the mycelium and the fungi and of this kind of endless growth that's underneath us. So it's wonderful. Do you see each other as a family often now, or are they all running around the world?
Yeah, they're running around the world actually.
Sounds like it.
And they've now moved. They both got old Methodist chapels. Two of them, both of them, got their own chapels
Oh my
in
goodness.
Washington. And but we see them. We're about to spend a few weeks with them now.
Right, with the
And so
holidays.
yes, yeah. So we will definitely see them, and we do see them, and it's what they're doing is extraordinary. Yeah.
Well, you gave birth to them. So there you go. I really appreciate you taking this time to dig a little deeper, dive a little deeper with me on some of these ideas. And I hope we get to talk again. I may
Sure.
take one of your classes again.
Do well. Come to the family constellations. That's amazing. Yeah. If you
But
did the voice one.
when is
Well, I'm
that?
doing. I twice a year now. I do it face to face. A
Right,
week
that's what I
a
would
week.
like. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I
I
would
do a
like.
week of it, and so the next one is April 25th to May the 1st, and so I usually do it around Beltane, which is May 1st, and
Okay.
and then because it's about ancestors, which have no agency unless we acknowledge them. I usually try and do it at the Festival of the Dead, but actually this coming year, I can't because the room I do it in is quite big, and they suddenly decided to use that period. So it's actually on the 20th. When is it? 23rd to the 29th of November. I think it is.
Oh, not
Uh,
April.
yes, yes. No, April the 25th.
Yes, yeah.
I do it twice. Yeah,
I see, I
I do,
see.
yeah, I do it twice a year, and I just have
And
to.
where is it? In which city?
It's in North London. It's in
Oh, it's in London. Okay.
yeah, it's in London, and it's non-residential. Um,
So that
uh,
can get quite pricey from someone coming out from the outside.
well, we have I'm just looking for the dates. Where are the dates?
Oh, we'll post it. We'll
Anyway, I
post.
think it's the end of November.
Yeah.
Um, so there are lots of Airbnbs nearby. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But the 25th of April is the one to come to. That's the next
Okay.
one. Yeah,
I may do. Let's see how
yeah.
my paths take me. I feel like I'm permanently jet lagged these days. Just
I
moving around
know.
so much. I woke up
Yeah.
at 5 in the morning. Although I have to say I love doing the jet lag where I wake up early.
Where do you
That's
live?
So I'm based in Los Angeles
Oh, okay.
and I have a house upstate New York
Right,
and I'm going back and forth now. And
right.
then I have family in Belgrade in Serbia.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
it's a lot. And then my daughter is in China and Philippines. So we're just spread out too much. It's too much for me to go all over. My other daughter's in Atlanta. I just came back.
I used to go on these trips. The first one was the Science and Religion, the Black Sea in Crisis was the first one, and then one of them we went down the Danube, and so of course we went through down the Danube, up the Danube, down the Danube, I guess. Yeah, we ended in the Delta, but that was very interesting going through Serbia, the whole region which
Yugoslavia. Yeah.
used to
So
be Yugoslavia.
yeah, well, that's how I identify myself. I
Of
find it
course.
very hard to think of all the 7 countries now. It's insane.
Oh, they're crazy.
It's
Yeah.
insane. It
I
just
mean, it's talk about the Balkanization of the Balkans.
there it is in action.
Yeah.
This was
Okay.
truly, truly delightful, and I'm super grateful. I relate to what you're talking about. I love your story. I may ask you for some more. I will edit
Okay.
and clean up these parts, for
Sure.
instance. I mean,
And
it's
and send me the link. Yeah.
of
Yeah.
course it flowed quite beautifully. What I do, just for you to know, is once you approve it, I put it on SoundCloud for people who like to listen, which is a lot of people. and
Okay.
then on YouTube with images or videos, and I'll dig up as much as I can, but you may come, oh, I have this or I have that, and you can add
So
to
you
it.
don't have the video of us talking then? You
I
don't do.
do, of
Oh, you do,
course.
you do, you do.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, but I'm saying I superimpose
Yes.
images
Right.
so that
Exactly.
it's not just us talking.
Sure.
And there are some videos you mentioned, and that's on your website that I can
Yeah,
grab.
lots. Yeah.
But there may be other things that you dig up that's maybe not
Yeah.
out
Well,
there
look
yet.
for the BBC film,
Yeah, that I
More
know.
Ways to Learn, and then this thing I did with Marina Abramovich, More Ways.
You can oh
One
yeah,
more
the
breath, just
one more
one more
breath.
breath. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
I made
That's
note of it. Yes.
and she's not on it, but we were all given the five of us that she had
Right.
curated.
Yes.
We're
Yes.
all given a film crew, and that was the one I did, and it was
Very cool.
very,
Very
yeah.
cool. I love all these worlds interacting with each other. So what's
Good.
next for you? Where are
Oh my
you
goodness.
thinking?
Well, I've just done my spring week my autumn week this year, and well, we're going back. We used to go back to Canada every year to teach in British Columbia, and then we through COVID we couldn't go, and then we're having these no fly years. So this year,
Right.
next year we'll go back.
So
So
who's we? You
Ruben
and
and I,
oh,
well,
you do
actually Merlin and Cosmo as well. We're all four of us go there. Yeah.
go to Canada.
We go to British Columbia, an island off Vancouver Island.
I see. And you teach there or you
Yeah, I teach there, so I'm giving a workshop there July 24th to the 29th.
aha,
Yeah.
great. So teaching is now your main focus.
Yes, 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 I love it.
I know you're so good at it.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so
Good.
much.
Yeah, you're most welcome.
I hope you
Yeah,
have a great evening. We got a
thank
day
you.
starting here.
Yeah, yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.